And you're looking for sort of anecdotal stuff, or I guess which direction? Because I'm not very good storyteller, but I'll try to do the best I can. Ideas.
First of all, you've got an accent, so anything you say is going to be delicious.
Maybe I'll work on it a little bit.
You can say
make it a little heavier. When I come to America, everything was brighter. The colors were better. The light was stronger.
Back to Craft Truck Through the Lens. We're here with the one and only Wolfgang. There is only one name.
There's the Wolfgang, yeah.
The Wolfgang. This is a photographer who has shot just a ton of documentaries, many of which you've been part of or partnered on, or you're sort of one of the photographers. Sometimes you are the photographer, and you've also shot a lot of narrative too.
Yeah, I know. I've started out with a lot of not narrative. It's funny that I sort of started shooting more independent features in New York. I shot about 20 of them, and over the years, and always shooting documentaries, but over the years, especially living in New York, I found much more interesting projects in documentary. So in the last decade, I've been shifting much more to doc work.
You were born in...
I was born in Bonn in Germany on the Rhine, which is the former capital. We used to call it the capital village because it's like 300,000 people, but it's the capital of West Germany before they unified and went back to Berlin.
So who are your favorite cinematic influences?
In Germany, I like Robbie Miller, who shot all of Wim Wenders films. He's definitely one guy I look to a lot. And here, I think I like Roger Deakins. I guess I love people who have sort of shooting so much documentary, like in natural light and stuff, there's sort of less forced kind of storytelling. I gravitate to guys like that. You know, you mentioned Gordon Willis. He's amazing with lighting. There's so many. New one is Rodrigo Prieto. I love his work because again, he uses natural lights and the camera is always right there and it moves and it's not always on tripod, and the way it moves is very exciting.
First we'll talk about your documentaries, then we'll talk about your narratives, and then we'll combine it all with one recent movie that is of note. But what were some of your favorite documentaries that you shot?
That I've shot? Well, an early project that is a while ago is called Children Underground. It's a documentary that was a labor of love that a young woman out of journalist school named Edith Belzberg was doing. She got a grant of $30,000. I went over with her, no sound person, the two of us, to film homeless kids in Bucharest, Romania on the street. For 6 weeks. We basically lived on the streets with them. Well, we didn't live on the street, but we filmed them 24 hours. We actually lived in a monastery where we got free rooms.
So how did you film in 24 hours? You would just mount cameras? And...
No. This is all like one camera, single camera approach, which I'm just like I like single camera approach in features. I love that in documentary. I'm not a multicam guy. This is the difference between verite shooting to me and the kind of shooting we have for a lot of cameras like in reality TV, where you capture everything by every angle. To me, the movement, the way one camera captures the scene is where the cinematographic style comes in. So what we did in that film, because I couldn't shoot, the police didn't like us filming the film because it was after Bucharest had opened and they didn't like cameras on the street and showing the bad side of Romania and all these homeless kids. So we had to shoot with a shoulder camera but under the coat. So I would shoot like this a lot, but with long lenses. And the style of the film is all handheld, but it's all compressed long lenses. So shooting through the viewfinder with long lenses and tracking focus walking around.
And trying to keep it steady, which on a long lens, the long lens.
So I pressed myself against the wall and I did little walk shots. And we captured 6 amazing characters who live in a subway station in Bucharest and spent the better part of 6 weeks with them, day and night, some day shifts and night shifts. Got really close with them and did this film that, 3 years later was nominated for an Academy Award out of nowhere, no money in it, nobody got paid. It was one of those labor of loves that actually got seen by a lot of people. A lot of NGOs used it. It's one of those films, in terms of the social film, had a huge impact.
Is there any particular sequence in the film that is one of your favorites?
Oh, there's so many. There's a particular moment where Macarena, one of the kids, she's actually a gypsy, a Roma, and she's, even within the group of homeless kids, she's on the lowest rung of the bar. She's beautiful, and she's mostly high. She sniffs Orolac, this paint thinner. And you see her like with all the stuff on her mouth, and I follow her to the subway, and there's some beautiful shots on that. Beautiful, horrifying shots, but also
just
very the intensity is very and she had a beautiful grace to her. There's an interview that was shot with her later, where she talks about having a twin sister, which I find a very moving moment.
Și mai am încă o soră, tot Macarena. Ea este în București, la o școală. mulți înainte. Ea mai mă duc câteodată pe la ea la școală. Se împacă bine colegii, învață bine. Noi suntem gemeni de mamă și de tată. Gemeni de mamă și de tată.
She doesn't have any sisters. She made up this sister that she has that goes to school, wears beautiful clothes, and has his 2 parents and lives in a house. She goes into this elaborate story of this sister, which is the life she never lived. It's a very towards the end of the film, it's a very moving story. And what happened is, of course, the whole thing is in Romanian. I don't speak Romanian. Seeing some of the stuff translated and edited later, it's actually a new revelation for me sometimes, because you don't quite know what they were saying. You feel it, but you don't quite understand it.
Understand what they're saying, yeah. Tell me the difference between shooting documentary over the past 10 years, how it's evolved with the changing of cameras.
I find it exciting to shoot documentaries right now because there's so much reality TV over the last 10 years. And that gave verite type filmmaking, which is the type of filmmaking where you follow people live and try to capture stories as opposed to doing interviews and setting it up and having voiceover type documentaries. And it gave that a lot more play. So I see a lot more of these kind of documentaries playing in the movies, getting bigger airtime, being on HBO, Showtime, getting primetime view on PBS. That didn't happen before, and I think it's because people accept the style because of reality TV. They accept that you can run around people, capture people live. And a lot of the stuff that used to be like good in storytelling and narrative storytelling now looks very set up. People get savvy to that from reality TV.
Tell us about another...
What? Metallica, some kind of monster?
Well, yeah, now you're talking about a picture that is... It's kind of, ironically, it's kind of a cult film. Anyone who's seen this movie, this Metallica, some kind of monster documentary, doesn't forget about it. What was it like being exposed to that environment? I mean, now you're talking about, you're not making a narrative film, but you are exposed to stars, rock stars.
Right. The band wanted this film to be done because the band was about to break up. And they submitted themselves to go into some kind of therapy to keep the band together. And they felt a film of this would be a cool part of it. So this is how Joe and Bruce got involved with them, you know, because they'd done some other projects before. They trusted them. They figured, like, this could almost be part of the therapy, this film. But then you deal with the day-to-day, you know, with them in the rehearsal room and I mean, they're all, you spend so much time on these things, you know, I mean, that after a while they forget you're there with the camera.
I don't want to pick a fight.
This is so silly. You're just sitting there going, I'm in a really pissy mood, and
I fucking told you straight up that I was.
Right.
And what are you trying to do?
I'm not trying to do fucking shit. You're just sitting here being a complete dick.
You're really helping matters.
I mean, they're cool and they're, you know, very friendly and we got along, but it's not that you're not almost interacting with them that much once you start shooting after a while. So they're in the rehearsal room and they're just doing their thing. And James was pretty angry at the time still, so he would throw pics at me, you know, when I would get in his eye line or something, you know.
Are you trying to be as unobtrusive as possible in this situation?
Generally, I'm not. I'm not sort of the belief that the camera's ever invisible. I feel like it's more like a catalyst, so I feel like I'm there, and it's more about the relationship I build with people, at least with non-stars. That said, with the celebrities, it sort of works the other way around, because they get so overexposed by cameras. I think you have to work on making yourself very kind of flat and be more the fly on the wall. And I love using longer lenses, which I think always, you know, goes along those lines. And a lot of people who shoot this kind of documentary don't do that because it's easy to miss things.
Do you like using longer lenses in narrative films?
I do. It's just the look I like. I mean, well, my favorite lens is the 40mm and 35.
That's
you know,
funny you say that.
I could shoot a whole film in the 40mm.
Just so you know, when we went and interviewed Gordon Willis,
yeah,
I said, was there a favorite lens that you had? He goes, I'm a 40mm guy. I like a 40mm. He's
in good company, right?
Yeah, they're in good company. But let me ask you, a 40mm on a Super 35 is not the same as a 40mm on a full frame, obviously.
Yeah.
And it isn't that long. I mean, you're saying you like long, I mean...
No, but in narrative, but what I'm saying, the 40mm is what, I mean, they say in 35mm, 50mm matches the perspective of the human eye the most. I find the 40mm does that, and I guess maybe that's what I feel like. I also like the way at a 40mm in 35mm, what happens, you get that slight fall off, even in wider shots, and it makes it cinematic to me. So not everything, the background goes slightly soft, and you have a two-shot where you see the two people, it's wide enough to hold them in a normal space, but the background goes slightly out, and you have that sort of cinematic depth.
Yeah.
You don't get that so much with the 32. And then when you go to longer lenses, they're great for close-ups and this and that, or for specialty shots, and I use it a lot in documentary. But in narrative, as sort of the main shots, or the main, you know, the 40 mil does somehow the perfect perspective to me.
Is there a
and
movie?
you can do close-ups with it, and that still looks okay.
Right, you just move it closer. Yeah.
And it still is not distorting the face. It's still pleasant on the face. It's just a normal perspective, you know.
And is there a movie on which a narrative movie on which you lived on the 40 mil quite a bit, or?
Well, I shot one film that never came out, so it wasn't a great film, but it was shot in video. It was early on when nobody was shooting video. There was a film called I Will Avenge You, Iago, and it was a thriller type story that involved opera and real life. But we could only afford one lens, so we shot it with a Panasonic 2/3 chip camera, so I chose the lens. I forgot what the millimeter was. It was the equivalent of a 40. We had a Fuji prime lens with an adapter onto the video camera. The 2/3 chip camera, I think it was a 17 millimeter or something that became a 40 mil. And we did the whole film in that one lens, and it worked beautifully. I'd do that again.
I think that's the best story about a movie that never came out that I've ever heard.
Right.
No, but really, I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, and you probably learned a lot from that experience too.
Sometimes less is more, to put it simple. But seriously, I mean, I feel sometimes maybe everybody, but I'm certainly overdoing it. I'm adding too many lights. When I turn lights off, sometimes things get better. When I have too many choices, I sometimes fret over choices and do things just because I have the choice that maybe are not always helping the story. Or
What was your best narrative film experience?
It's the first 35 film I shot. It was a film called Ripe. It was a great experience just creatively, but also working on the larger canvas. And because I was used to 60 millimeter, I was beating up the 35 like hell. I was flashing the image, and I was going for all kinds of textures to not make it too crisp. And it was down in the south, so we worked with the haze and the fog and the long lenses to compress the heat, and it had a really nice local feeling to it too.
Fabulous. Now, merging narrative and documentary, we arrive at a picture, Sacha Baron Cohen's Bruno. Obviously, Borat was a huge success. You're going into making this film. I mean, first of all, how do they pick you?
I was on a very crazy shoot with 5 Buddhist monks in the middle of Himalayas with no satellite phone reception. We hadn't had cell phones in 6 weeks, but we didn't even have satellite reception because the valleys were so narrow that there was so little sky we couldn't attach to satellites. That's when I got the call, you know, whether I wanted to work on it. It came through my agent. I don't quite know how they found me, but it took about a week until I got back to them because it was just very hard to make the contact. But I think I had a reputation as a camera guy who shoots, you know, narrative, verite type documentary well, and that was part of the style. And I think they wanted somebody who had that sort of German alibi to help with the German speaking, with the whole selling the idea that he's an Austrian late night cable guy.
Oh,
so I think the combination of being an established doc guy who shoots these kind of documentaries well, who could also look the part and maybe even help a little bit with the German element was perfect for them. I think that's how I got in. And a friend of mine worked on the first part, you know, on the Borat past, and it was actually, they always shoot with 2 camera people. So it was co-DP'd with Anthony Hardwick, who also shot Borat. So he basically had done the whole drill. He knew exactly how Sacha liked to work. So I was sort of falling in line with him, you know, because there's a certain shtick in the way you shoot these things, or like a certain setup that, you know, the one camera goes wide and the other one falls around in a tighter shot, and there's almost like a very set way of covering it.
What you're describing is almost balletic, where, you know, you sort of have to develop a radio frequency connection where you go, hey, if he's going to move this way, I'm going to move that way.
When you walk around, yes, and Sacha would always know which camera, he addresses camera, but only one of the 2.
Is there any sequences in that film where people knew it was him and just had to pretend that they didn't know?
Well, the only person that was in on the joke was Harrison Ford.
It's the time you've all been waiting for. It's my one-on-one exclusive interview with Harrison Ford!
Also, her mit Harrison Ford.
He was cool. He came up and, you know, in his black Prius by himself, no entourage, and did the scene outside a restaurant with us, and went really quick. We shot the scene also with Arnold Schwarzenegger, but never made the film, so we still shot a second version of it. Those were the only 2 people who were in on it.
So the scene with Paula Abdul,
totally not staged. She had no idea what hit her.
So
and when she's
sitting down,
when she's upset in the end, that's part of it. And she's trying to reach her manager, who's upstairs. He was sequestered, so he didn't watch the interview. This is all for real, you know. I mean, they had no idea what hit them.
Is there ever a point while you're shooting this thing that you're close to shitting your pants laughing? I mean,
all the
is there?
time. Yeah. All the time.
Okay,
I mean, Anthony and I, we would just always we found a way of shooting, you know, where we like shoot like this. You know, the viewfinder's here and we shoot like that. And it was just like you're always making some fumbly things with your fingers so it doesn't look like you're hiding your face. But
what can you do about lighting in these situations? Nothing?
we actually lit a lot of it, yeah. We always go in beforehand and hang up documentary tagline, some globes or some light panels and stuff.
Something. So let's talk about one particular sequence in there. Probably the most uncomfortable sequence in the movie. Well, for me anyway.
Yeah.
It was kind of like just like a free orgy type.
You must give a lot of milk.
Yeah. Yes.
You must produce a lot of milk.
She's got to be wondering what the hell are these cameras here for? And
No, this is explained to the people. People go out beforehand when they try to find characters and tell them there's this late night TV show, this Austrian guy, he's very eccentric. He's making a film and they give some kind of reason why he wants to do a scene like this. He said, well, in this case, they were saying, for one, they try to find out whether they'd seen Borat, whether they were familiar with the character to make sure that they wouldn't recognize him instantly. And when that was clear, then they would try to tell the person, and in that case, they would say, well, he's gay, he's very gay, but he wants to become straight.
he wants reversion therapy.
So, yeah, it's basically,
okay.
That's the setup. The sex tapes with the politicians were harder because there we had to get out of there quickly, you know, and we had sort of local production companies that would hire the tripods and the lights from a local production company, and we'd just, at the end of the whole interview, we'd like slide out the cameras and go out the backstage to a van that was waiting and hightail out of there, you know. While the crew that had no idea who we were, you know, the lighting crew would pack up the gear, you know.
You just got out of there.
We just hightail. There was a lot of hightailing out of stuff and casing joints and figuring out where the van is and how to get out of there and escape routes and, you know.
So what you're saying is,
There's a whole
shooting
element.
Bruno was really more about the real practice of filmmaking, which is essentially being a criminal, than it was about, you know, the art of...
It felt like doing a heist all the time and casing the bank and figuring out how you get in and how you get out.
Casing the joint. You've also had a sequence where you're walking down Mea Sharim.
Right. That was the scariest.
That must have been the scariest.
Well, the scenes in the film when he's running away from all the angry Hasidics, totally real. He was hightailing as fast as he could on those high heels because that was like, they were after him. And in the running away, you know, there were like clusters hanging on cars, and the escape route was a little muddled there because we were pretty spread out with long lenses on three sides of the street, you know, with 3 cameras up. And
how did you deal with getting even the camera? You go in there with a camera, and
well, we were across the street. It looked like we're shooting a documentary, setting up a shot, you know, not pointing at where he's going to walk. And then when he's walking, we're panning over.
Also pan over, yeah.
And then we have the long lenses. We shoot it for a while. This stuff happens like 3 or 4 minutes, and then there's some giggling kids. You get a couple of cutaways. You have to be very quick to get them. And then at some point, I saw people on cell phones, you know, calling each other. And then more people came. And
That's
they came.
what it is, yeah.
It took probably not more than, I'd say, 10 minutes to have a cluster of maybe
fuming.
Dozens of fuming, maybe even over 100 fuming, you know, traditional Hasidics who were like very angry. And one of the PAs actually got bumped, you know, his shin was like a little bruised in the van. They drove off with the van door open, they're pushing the doors and the door went over his leg and they're hanging on the cars. It was a very crazy getaway. That was the one time I actually felt really like something bad could happen. That was actually the worst of all the situations, I think.
Wow.
It's the most physically violent.
Wow. Overall, was that a good experience making that movie?
It's great. I mean, I told Sasha a lot of words, how to say, you know, a lot of ways how to say cock in German. So that was a first.
Maybe show a bit of skin or something like that?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, what about just like one Kugelsack?
So, listen, what's next for you?
Oh, what am I doing right now? Film about Americans in Bed for HBO by a British director called Americans in Bed. Doing that this week and next week.
Fantastic.
Working on a couple of documentaries of my own.
Fantastic.
About subway musicians.
Wolfgang?
Yeah,
Thank
good
you
enough.
for joining us.
All right,
It's
man.
fabulous.